My wife's coworker tried to intimidate me at her office party until he learned what happens when quiet confidence is mistaken for weakness open. Instead, it became the night her colleagues learned what happens when someone mistakes quiet confidence for weakness. The venue was one of those upscale hotel ballrooms downtown. My wife had been talking about this party for weeks, mainly because her company always went all out. Open bar, decent food, and enough corporate small talk to last a lifetime. I wore my best suit, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because my wife deserved to have a husband who looked the part. The evening started normally enough. I met her supervisor, chatted with a few people from accounting, and even managed to have a decent conversation with someone from human resources about weekend plans. My wife was in her element, moving from group to group, introducing me with genuine pride in her voice. That is when I noticed him. He had been watching us from across the room for the better part of an hour. Tall guy, probably mid-30s, with the kind of build that screamed gym membership and protein shakes. He had this way of standing that took up more space than necessary. Arms crossed, chin slightly raised, classic peacocking behavior. My wife had mentioned him before, always bragging about his weekend adventures, his truck, his hunting trips. The kind of guy who turned every conversation into a story about his own supposed toughness. She would roll her eyes when she told me about his latest claims, but I could tell some of her female coworkers ate it up. The confrontation started when we were near the bar. I was getting my wife a drink when he approached. No preamble, no polite introduction. "You are the husband," he said, looking me up and down like I was a used car he was considering buying. "I have heard a lot about you." I handed my wife her drink and turned to face him fully. "All good things, I hope?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She talks about you sometimes. Quiet type, right? Works in an office, minds his own business." The way he said it made it sound like a character flaw. My wife stepped closer, clearly uncomfortable. "Maybe we should—" "No, let the men talk," he interrupted, not even looking at her. His eyes stayed locked on mine. I was just wondering what kind of man lets his wife work late nights with all these characters around. The nearby conversation started to fade as people picked up on the tension. I could feel eyes turning our way, but I kept my voice level. The kind who trusts his wife and does not need to mark his territory at office parties. His face darkened. "Territory? This is not about territory. This is about protection. A real man makes sure his woman feels safe." I took a sip of my drink, letting the silence stretch. "She does feel safe with you." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Look at you. What happens if someone really threatens her? Are you going to talk them to death?" The circle of onlookers was growing. I could see my wife's face in my peripheral vision, a mix of embarrassment and something else I could not quite read. Her coworkers were watching like this was dinner theater. "Interesting question," I said, setting my drink down on a nearby table. "What did you have in mind?" That is when he made his mistake. He put his hand on my chest and shoved me backward. Not hard enough to knock me down, but hard enough to make his point in front of everyone. "Maybe someone who can actually stand up for her," he said loud enough for half the room to hear. "Not some pencil pusher who—" I moved before he finished the sentence. Years of self-defense training kicked in without conscious thought. I grabbed his wrist, stepped into his space, and used his own momentum against him. The technique was simple, clean, and devastatingly effective. His feet left the ground. His back hit the marble floor, and the sound echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. The room went dead silent. He tried to get up immediately, probably more embarrassed than hurt. That is when I made my position clear. I placed my foot on his chest. Not enough pressure to injure, but enough to keep him exactly where he was. "You wanted to know what real protection looks like," I said, my voice carrying in the silence. "It does not announce itself. It does not brag, and it sure as hell does not need to prove anything at Christmas parties." He was gasping, both from the impact and from rage. "Get off me, you!" I am not done talking. I pressed down just slightly. "You see, a real man does not need to tell everyone how tough he is. He does not need to intimidate women at work or challenge their husbands at social events. And he definitely does not put his hands on people who have not given him permission." Security was pushing through the crowd now, but they were taking their time, probably trying to figure out exactly what they had walked into. "Here is what is going to happen," I continued, looking down at him. "You are going to apologize to my wife for your behavior tonight. You are going to keep your opinions about our marriage to yourself, and you are going to remember this moment every time you think about disrespecting either of us again." I stepped back, allowing him to sit up. He was red-faced, furious, and completely humiliated in front of his co-workers. Instead of taking the graceful exit I had offered, he chose to double down. "You think you are tough," he snarled, scrambling to his feet. "Let us see how tough you really are." He swung at me with everything he had. I did not move out of the way. I moved into it. The counterattack was swift and surgical. I deflected his punch, grabbed his arm, and introduced his face to my knee. The crack was audible throughout the ballroom. He dropped like a stone. This time, he was not getting back up. Blood was pooling on the marble floor beneath his broken nose. The silence in the ballroom was deafening, broken only by his labored breathing and the distant sound of someone calling for an ambulance. Security finally reached us, but they moved with obvious caution. Two guys in cheap suits who suddenly looked like they would rather be anywhere else. The lead guard, a heavy-set man with nervous eyes, approached slowly. "Sir, I need you to step away from him." I was already stepping back, hands visible, posture relaxed. "No problem." He attacked me twice. There were about 50 witnesses. The guard looked around at the crowd of frozen faces, then down at the man on the floor. "What happened here?" Before I could answer, my wife's voice cut through the tension. "He shoved my husband first, then tried to punch him." Her voice was steady, but I could hear something new in it, something I had never heard before. A woman from accounting nodded vigorously. "That is exactly what happened. This guy," she pointed at the man on the floor, "started the whole thing, got aggressive, pushed him, then threw a punch." More voices joined in corroborating the story. Amazing how differently people see things when the dust settles. Half an hour ago, some of these same people were watching like it was entertainment. Now they were eager to distance themselves from the aggressor. The paramedics arrived within minutes, professional, efficient, asking the right questions. The man on the floor was conscious but groggy. Blood streaming from his nose, possible concussion. They loaded him onto a stretcher with practiced ease. As they wheeled him past me, he managed to lock eyes with mine. Even through his obvious pain and humiliation, I could see the rage burning there. This was not over for him. Good. Some lessons need reinforcement. The hotel manager appeared, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he would rather be dealing with overbooked rooms than assault charges. He pulled me aside while the paramedics worked. "Sir, I need to understand what happened here." I explained it simply, factually. He pushed me. I defended myself. He attacked me. I stopped him. The manager's relief was visible when I assured him I had no intention of suing the hotel for inadequate security. "We have cameras throughout the ballroom," he said, clearly hoping this would help his case. "Everything should be recorded." "Perfect. Then you will see exactly what I just told you." While I dealt with the logistics, I watched my wife out of the corner of my eye. She was surrounded by her co-workers, answering their rapid-fire questions with a dazed expression. The woman I had married was conflict-averse, always looking to smooth things over, find the middle ground. But tonight she had stood up for me without hesitation. Her supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, approached me after the manager walked away. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "We all knew he was problematic, but we never imagined he would do something like this." "Problematic?" Patricia glanced around nervously. "Comments about the women in the office. Nothing actionable but inappropriate. Your wife complained to Human Resources twice about things he said to her. This was news to me. My wife had mentioned he was annoying, but she had never said anything about complaints to Human Resources. I filed that information away for later discussion." "What kind of comments?" Patricia hesitated. "He told her once that if she ever got tired of being married to a soft man, he could show her what a real relationship felt like. Another time, he cornered her in the break room and asked if he knew how to handle a woman like her. The rage that shot through me was white-hot and instant. I had to consciously relax my fists. When did this happen?" "The past few months." She tried to handle it professionally. She did not want to make waves, but tonight, she looked toward where the paramedics had taken him. "I think we all understand now why she was not worried about having you handle it." My wife appeared at my elbow, having extracted herself from the crowd of questioners. "Can we go home now?" The police had already taken statements from multiple witnesses. The hotel security footage would back up everything. There was nothing left to do here except watch the remaining party guests pretend they were not staring at us. As we waited for the valet to bring our car, my wife was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke without looking at me. "I never told you about the things he said to me." Patricia mentioned something. "I thought I could handle it myself. I thought if I just ignored him, he would get bored and move on." She turned to face me. I was wrong. The valet pulled up with our car. As I tipped him and held the door for my wife, I could feel eyes watching us from the hotel lobby. Word would spread fast through her office. By Monday morning, everyone would know exactly what happened. "You want to know something interesting?" I said as we pulled out of the parking garage. "He called me a pencil pusher tonight, implied I was weak because I work in an office." My wife looked at me curiously. "What is interesting about that?" "He works in an office too. Same building as you. In fact, spends his days in meetings and conference calls just like me. But somehow he convinced himself that made him more of a man." I glanced over at her. Funny how that works. She was quiet for several blocks. "Then, I have never seen you fight before. I do not fight, I end fights. What is the difference?" I considered the question. Fighting is about proving something. Ending fights is about protecting something. When we got home, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the couch still in her party dress. I loosened my tie and joined her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now he learns that actions have consequences. And your CO workers learn that quiet does not mean weak." She nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about the look on his face when you put your foot on his chest. He was so shocked. He has been living in a world where his size and his mouth made him the alpha. Tonight, he discovered he was just the loudest." My phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number." I showed it to my wife. "This is not over." She read it and looked up at me with concern. "Should we call the police?" I deleted the message and set the phone aside. Let him make the next move. He has already proven he is not smart enough to quit while he is behind. The truth was, I hoped he would try something. Tonight had been defensive. Next time I would not need to hold back. Monday morning brought a phone call from my wife's human resources department. Professional, polite, but clearly nervous. They needed to speak with both of us about the incident at the Christmas party. I took the afternoon off work and met my wife at her office building. The corporate headquarters was one of those glass towers downtown, all marble lobbies and expensive artwork. We rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence. The human resources director was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who got straight to business. "We have reviewed the security footage from the hotel, spoken with witnesses, and received the police report. You acted in clear self-defense." She slid a tablet across the table showing the ballroom security camera feed. The footage was crystal clear. Him shoving me first, him throwing the punch, me ending it efficiently, even without audio. His aggressive body language was obvious. "However," she continued, "we need to discuss the broader situation. This incident has brought some other issues to light." That is when the floodgates opened. Over the next hour, we learned that my wife was not his only target. 3 other women in the office had filed informal complaints about his behavior over the past year. Comments about their appearance, inappropriate questions about their personal lives, standing too close during conversations. "Why was not anything done?" my wife asked. The human resources director shifted uncomfortably. The complaints were vague. No direct harassment, nothing we could definitively act on. He was careful to stay just inside the line. "Until Saturday night," I said. "Exactly, Saturday night. He crossed several lines very publicly. They showed us printouts of his social media posts from the weekend. Photos from his hospital bed claiming he had been ambushed at a work party. Comments from his friends calling for revenge. Threats barely disguised as tough guy posturing. We forwarded these to the police," the human resources director said. "But there is more. The company's information technology department had been quietly monitoring his work communications after the previous complaints. What they found painted a picture of a man who saw his workplace as his personal hunting ground. Email threads with male CO workers where he rated female employees. Screenshots he had taken of women's social media photos, shared in group chats with crude commentary. A detailed list he had kept of which women in the office were married, single, or available for upgrade. My wife's name was highlighted throughout his communications. He had been tracking her schedule, noting when she worked late, when I picked her up, when I did not. He had even researched me online, screenshots of my LinkedIn profile annotated with dismissive comments about my profession. "This is stalking," my wife said, her voice tight with anger. "It is definitely harassment," the human resources director agreed. "And it creates a hostile work environment for multiple employees." The most damning evidence came from his browser history. He had been looking up information about restraining orders, trying to figure out how to file one against me. He had also researched assault charges, clearly planning to press charges for the incident. That plan had backfired spectacularly when the police reviewed the hotel's security footage and witness statements. Instead of me facing charges, he was looking at assault charges himself, plus potential stalking and harassment charges based on the evidence human resources had uncovered. "What is the company's position?" I asked. "Termination effective immediately. We are also considering a restraining order to keep him away from the building and company events." My wife looked relieved, but I could see the stress of the past few days in her face. "What about the other women he targeted? Are they safe?" "We are offering counseling services and the option to transfer department if anyone feels uncomfortable. We are also implementing additional security measures and updating our harassment policies." As we left the building, my wife was unusually quiet in the parking garage. She finally spoke. "I feel stupid." "Why?" "Because I did not see it. All those months, I thought he was just an annoying coworker. I did not realize he was planning something." I stopped walking and turned to face her. "You are not responsible for his behavior. You reported what you could when you could, but you saw it immediately. Saturday night, you knew exactly what kind of person he was. I had the advantage of seeing him when he dropped his mask. You had to work with him every day. Maintain professional relationships. That is harder." We got in the car and sat in silence for a moment. Then my phone rang. Unknown number again. "Do not answer it," my wife said quickly. I showed her the screen. "It is not him. It is the detective handling the case." The detective's news was straightforward. They had enough evidence to charge him with assault, harassment, and making terroristic threats. The social media posts and text messages had sealed his fate. His lawyer was already talking about a plea deal. "There is one more thing," the detective said. "We found something in his car when we executed the search warrant." "What kind of something?" "Photos of your wife leaving work, getting in your car, walking to lunch, taken over several weeks with a telephoto lens." The rage that had been simmering since Saturday night flared white hot. "How many photos?" "Over 100. Some from inside your neighborhood." "Two?" I looked at my wife, who had gone pale. "He was watching our house?" "Appears so. We are adding stalking charges to the list." After I hung up, we sat in the car processing this new information. My wife was shaking, not from fear, but from anger. "He was watching me for months," she said. "Planning what exactly?" "It does not matter now. He is done." "But what if you had not been there Saturday night? What if he had cornered me somewhere else, somewhere private?" That was a thought I did not want to pursue. He made his move in front of 50 witnesses because he thought he could intimidate me publicly. He was wrong about me, and now everyone knows it. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, my wife's supervisor. "Just wanted you both to know. Word has gotten around the office about what really happened. Everyone is talking about how he had been harassing multiple women, and how you finally put a stop to it. You have got a lot of respect around here." I showed the message to my wife for the first time since Saturday night. She smiled. "So I married the office hero. You married someone who does not tolerate disrespect." The hero part was just a bonus. As we drove home, I could see her confidence returning. The man who had made her workplace uncomfortable was gone. His behavior was exposed, and everyone now knew that she had someone in her corner who would not hesitate to act when it mattered. The only question remaining was whether he would be smart enough to accept his defeat or stupid enough to escalate further. Given his track record, I was not optimistic about his decision-making skills. The next few weeks changed everything about how my wife saw our marriage, her workplace, and herself. It started with small things I had not noticed before. She began leaving work exactly at closing time instead of staying late to finish projects. When I asked about it, she shrugged and said she was reevaluating her priorities. Turned out those late nights had not been about dedication to her job. They had been about avoiding him during his usual prowling hours in the office. "I did not even realize I was doing it," she admitted one evening over dinner. "I would schedule meetings earlier in the day, eat lunch at my desk, find reasons to leave the building when he was around. I was managing my entire work life around avoiding one person." The full scope of his harassment became clearer as she felt safe enough to talk about it. The comments about her appearance that she had brushed off as crude humor, the way he had positioned himself to block her path in hallways, forcing her to squeeze past him, the questions about our relationship disguised as friendly concern. "He asked me once if you were the type to fight for me if another man showed interest," she said. "I thought it was just small talk." "What did you tell him?" I said, "You did not need to fight for me because you trusted me." She paused. I realized now he was not asking about trust. He was gathering intelligence. Her female coworkers had started opening up too now that the threat was gone. Lunch conversations revealed a pattern of behavior that had made multiple women uncomfortable, but that none of them had felt they could address directly. We all just adapted, my wife explained. Changed our routines, avoided being alone with him, warned the new hires without being too obvious about it. It was like having a predator in the office that we all just learned to work around. The revelation that hit her hardest came from Patricia during a department meeting. My wife had always prided herself on being professional, on handling workplace conflicts diplomatically. Learning that her measured approach had been interpreted as weakness was a wake-up call. Patricia told me that he used to brag about how easy I was to intimidate, my wife said, her voice tight with anger. He would tell people that he could make me uncomfortable just by walking into a room, and I would find an excuse to leave. Were you intimidated by him? She considered the question carefully. Not intimidated, more like I wanted to avoid confrontation. I thought that was the mature way to handle it. And now I realize that sometimes avoiding confrontation just enables the confrontational person. The change in her was visible at work. Her posture was different, more confident. She spoke up in meetings instead of deferring to louder voices. When male colleagues interrupted her, she finished her sentences anyway, small changes but noticeable ones. More importantly, she started seeing our relationship through a different lens. We had been married for 5 years, and she had always appreciated that I was not the jealous type, that I did not need to mark my territory or make a show of possession. She had interpreted that as modern masculinity, evolved thinking. I thought guys who felt the need to protect their wives were insecure, she told me one night, like they did not trust their partners to handle themselves. What changed your mind? Watching you that night. You were not protecting me because you thought I was weak. You were protecting me because someone was actively threatening me. There is a difference. She had started noticing things about me that she had previously taken for granted. The way I automatically positioned myself between her and potential threats when we walked at night. How I would insist on checking out strange sounds in the house instead of sending her to investigate. Small protective instincts that she had never really registered before. I always thought that stuff was outdated gender role nonsense, she said. But there is something reassuring about being with someone who can handle himself when it matters. The most significant change was in how she talked about the incident itself. Initially, she had been embarrassed by the public nature of the confrontation, worried about what her coworkers would think. Now, she wore it almost like a badge of honor. Jennifer from accounting told me her husband would have just called security, she said with obvious pride. She said most of the wives were jealous that I had someone who would actually step up. How does that make you feel? Protected, really protected for the first time in years. The shift in our dynamic was subtle but unmistakable. She asked my opinion on workplace conflicts instead of just venting about them. When we were out together, she stayed closer, more physically connected. At home, she was more affectionate, more attentive. I feel like I am seeing you clearly for the first time, she told me. I married a man I thought was gentle and kind. It turns out I married a man who is gentle and kind until someone crosses the line. The incident had also changed how she viewed other men. The loud, boastful types she had previously found amusing now struck her as compensation for insecurity. The quiet confidence she had once overlooked in other husbands suddenly seemed more attractive. He used to talk about his hunting trips, his truck, his workout routine, she said, referring to her former tormentor. Always had to be the center of attention. Always had to one-up everyone else's stories. I thought that was just his personality. What do you think it was now? Overcompensation. Real confidence does not need an audience. 2 weeks after the incident, she came home with news that surprised me. The company had offered her a promotion to a different department, partly as compensation for the harassment she had endured, but also because her newfound assertiveness had impressed upper management. Patricia said, "I've been more decisive in meetings lately, more willing to challenge bad ideas instead of just going along to keep the peace." Are you going to take it? Absolutely. Clean slate, new environment, and a 20% raise. That evening, as we celebrated her promotion, she brought up something that had been on her mind. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For what?" "For not telling you how bad it was getting, for thinking I had to handle everything myself, for not trusting you to handle it the right way." You handled it exactly right. You reported it through proper channels. You documented everything. You stayed professional. The only thing you could not have predicted was him escalating to physical confrontation. But if I told you everything from the beginning, I would have handled it differently. Probably more aggressively. Definitely less legally. She laughed at that. So my way was better. Your way built a case. My way ended it. Looking back, I realized that the incident had revealed something about both of us. She had learned that strength did not always mean confrontation, and I had learned that sometimes confrontation was exactly what strength looked like. The man who tried to intimidate my wife had inadvertently strengthened our marriage. His pathetic attempt at dominance had shown both of us what real protection looked like, what real confidence felt like, and what real partnership meant. He was about to learn that some lessons are more expensive than others. 3 weeks after the Christmas party, I got a call from my wife's company lawyer. They needed me to attend a final meeting to close out the incident. The terminated employee wanted to clear the air before his criminal trial. I should have known it was a setup. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in the company's main conference room. When I arrived, he was already there with his lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he billed by the minute. My wife's human resources director was present along with building security and a court stenographer. Everything official, everything documented. He looked different than he had at the party. The swelling in his face had gone down, but his nose sat at a slightly different angle now. His left eye still showed traces of bruising. Most importantly, his cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by barely contained rage. "I want to make something clear," he said as soon as I sat down. "What happened at that party was a fluke. You got lucky." His lawyer put a restraining hand on his arm, but he shrugged it off. "I was not ready for you. I underestimated you. That will not happen again." The human resources director started to intervene, but I held up a hand. "Let him talk. I want this on record." "You think you are some kind of tough guy now? You think breaking my nose makes you a man?" His voice was rising despite his lawyer's obvious discomfort. "I know where you work. I know where you live. I know your routine." That crossed the line from posturing into direct threat. The security guards shifted in their chairs, ready to intervene. "Are you threatening me?" I asked calmly. "I am promising you. Next time we meet, it will not be at some fancy party with witnesses. It will be somewhere private where you cannot hide behind lawyers and security cameras." His lawyer was frantically taking notes, probably calculating how many additional charges his client had just earned himself. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "That is interesting because right now you are violating the restraining order just by being in the same building as my wife. You are making terroristic threats in front of multiple witnesses, and you are stupid enough to do it all while being recorded by a court stenographer." The color drained from his face as the reality of his situation hit him. "But here is what is really interesting," I continued. "You still think this is about toughness. You still think the reason you lost is because you were not ready or because the circumstances were not right. You still do not understand what actually happened that night." "Enlighten me," he snarled. "You did not lose because I got lucky. You lost because you are exactly the kind of man you pretend not to be, weak, insecure, the kind who needs to bully women to feel powerful, the kind who makes threats instead of taking action." I stood up slowly, and he instinctively shrank back in his chair. "You want to know the difference between us? I do not need to tell people I am dangerous. I do not need to make threats. I do not need to stalk women or intimidate coworkers to feel like a man." His lawyer was pulling at his sleeve, trying to get him to stop talking, but he was too far gone to listen. "We will see," he muttered. "We will see how tough you are when you follow through on your threats, when you escalate this beyond words." I smiled. "Please do, because next time I will not stop at a broken nose." The meeting ended abruptly after that. Security escorted him from the building while his lawyer frantically made phone calls, probably trying to arrange a better plea deal before his client dug himself any deeper. The human resources director looked shaken. Should we be concerned about retaliation? He is not smart enough for effective retaliation. He just proved that by making threats in front of witnesses. His parole officer will have him back in custody by tomorrow morning. I was right. By Wednesday, he was arrested for violating his restraining order and making terroristic threats. His plea deal evaporated, and he was looking at serious jail time. The final chapter of this story came 6 months later. My wife's new department was thriving. Her confidence at work had completely transformed, and our marriage was stronger than it had ever been. As for him, he spent 8 months in county jail, lost his professional license, and had to relocate to another state when he was released. Last I heard, he was working construction and keeping a much lower profile. Some men learn from their mistakes, others just learn that their mistakes have consequences. Either way, the lesson gets taught. 1 year later, Life had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and completely transformed. My wife thrived in her new position, leading projects with the kind of confidence that earned respect rather than demanded it. The promotion had been just the beginning. The Christmas party incident became something of a legend in her company, not because of the violence, but because of what it represented: a line in the sand, a statement that harassment would not be tolerated, that consequences were real, and that some people had others who would step up when necessary. Jennifer from accounting got engaged last month, my wife told me over dinner. She said her fiancé reminded her of you. Quiet confidence does not need to prove anything to anyone. How does that make you feel? Proud. Like I married the right man for the right reasons. The incident had changed how other couples in our social circle interacted too. Husbands who had previously been passive about disrespect toward their wives started speaking up. The standard for what constituted acceptable behavior had shifted, and everyone seemed to benefit from the clarity. My wife's workplace had implemented new policies, additional security measures, and mandatory training on harassment. The other women who had been targeted by him found their voices, filed formal complaints about past incidents, and helped create a safer environment for everyone. Patricia told me something interesting yesterday, my wife said. She said, "The office culture completely changed after what happened. Men are more respectful, women are more confident, and everyone is more productive because nobody is wasting energy managing around problem behavior." The legal aftermath had been swift and decisive. He pleaded guilty to multiple charges, served his time, and disappeared from our lives entirely. No appeals, no continued threats, no dramatic prison letters, just consequences applied and lessons learned. "Do you ever think about him?" my wife asked. "Sometimes I wonder if he learned anything, or if he just learned to be more careful about who he targets. Does it matter? Not to us. But it might matter to whoever he meets next." Our marriage had found a new equilibrium built on complete honesty and mutual respect. She no longer tried to handle everything alone, and I no longer assumed she would tell me if something was seriously wrong. We communicated better, trusted deeper, and appreciated each other more. "I used to think strength meant handling everything yourself," she reflected. "Now I know it means knowing when to ask for help and who to ask." The most satisfying part was not the victory itself, but watching my wife reclaim her confidence. She spoke differently at work, carried herself with more authority, and never again tolerated disrespect from anyone. The woman who had once tried to manage around conflict now addressed it head-on. "Someone new started in accounting last week," she told me. "Young guy, fresh out of college. He made some comment about how I must have gotten my promotion through connections rather than merit. What did you do?" I looked him straight in the eye and told him that if he ever questioned my qualifications again, he would find out exactly how I handled disrespect. Then I walked away. How did that work out? He apologized the next day and asked if I had time to mentor him on the project he was struggling with. That was the real victory. Not the broken nose, or the jail time, or the public humiliation. The real victory was my wife discovering that she did not need to shrink herself to make others comfortable. She could take up space, speak with authority, and expect respect without apology. The Christmas party incident had become a defining moment for both of us, not because of what I did that night, but because of what we both learned about ourselves and each other. Some people spend their whole lives wondering what they are made of. We found out in a hotel ballroom on a December evening, and we liked what we discovered. As for him, justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and life had moved forward. The best revenge was not the physical defeat or the legal consequences. It was building something better in the space where his toxicity used to exist. Every day my wife went to work confident and unafraid was a victory. Every decision she made from a position of strength rather than fear was a triumph. Every moment of peace in our marriage was proof that sometimes the right response to a bully is the end of the conversation permanently. The man who thought he could intimidate my wife had accidentally given us both exactly what we needed: clarity about who we were, what we were capable of, and what we meant to each other. Some gifts come in the strangest packages. Our story has come to an end. If you have made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you will enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I will be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.